Hi everyone, and welcome to another video with Creative Mastermind. Today we're going to talk about how to better design an invitation or a flyer and how to convey your thought in a much more effective and pleasing manner. And we're going to use alignments and margins and graphics to do so. Now in front of me I have an invitation, well, I'm going to be nice and call it an invitation, to a garden party on the 17th of August at 5 p.m. I know these things because I made the flyer and because some of them are bolded. But when you look at this, you don't see everything in an appealing manner. You are less likely to spend a lot of time looking at it. And that means that the flyer is ineffective. It's not doing its purpose. And the person who made it, it feels like it was very rushed and uncoordinated and unorganized, and there was little thought put into it. I can guarantee, if you haven't already in your life, you will receive something like this. And in some cases it's much worse. Everything goes off to the edges and it's terrible. And the thing is, design, everything has to be thoughtful. You can't just haphazardly place something somewhere or do something a certain way. You have to group the things that are important together, and you have to do so by organizing them together and not just throwing everything like this in one document where you are cordially invited. Goes all the way to August 17th at 5 p.m. where you may want to pull cordially invited away and that middle section all by itself and the bottom on a whole other section. Now what we're going to do is we're going to chunk all this and we're going to make a new invitation, and we're going to step by step change it up, and with just a few graphics make it much more pleasing to the eye and much easier as a whole to digest. The thing about design is, when you have good design, you'll feel good looking at it. You won't be distressed looking at it. With this, it doesn't keep people's attention. It doesn't make someone want to keep it. I can guarantee after this event is over, even before the event comes all the way, someone will input this date into their calendar, mobily or handwritten, and then they'll throw this piece of paper away. You want your flyer or your invitation to grab someone's attention long enough that they consider keeping it. They consider, oh, this is really nice. I'm going to put this up on the mantle, or I'm going to put this in my special box of things. There is nothing making someone keep this flyer right now. Not a single thing. There's nothing that makes this person want to tack this onto their fridge. It's not very memorable. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it memorable, and we're going to make it where someone wants to keep it. Someone wants to look at it and say, hey, did you see the invitation so-and-so made for the garden party? It was so cool. You want that. You don't want someone to go, their invitations were so bland, and their invitations were awful. That's the last thing you want. That's the absolute last thing you want. So we're going to redesign this, and we're going to make it much more effective and much more pleasing on the eye. Now, as a designer, I'm sure you've ran across a few things that you collect as resources, whether it be free or you've paid for them, whether it be textures, backgrounds, fonts. But think, like you want a garden party, so you want to collect some items. Now, it doesn't matter what you collect, as long as you collect something that is meaningful or that conveys what you want. You don't want to have something not relating to your theme. You want everything to match. Now in my case, I did a little scouting before I started this as for what I wanted to consider for my garden party. Now, you don't have to use all the resources you gather for a particular project. You can mix and match and feel what works and what doesn't, but have something to start with. Do that before you design, because sometimes that makes it easier. You start grouping things in your head and you start figuring out, okay, I want this to look this way and I want this to look this way, so I need to make that happen. So I decided to gather this digital paper, this wreath, a little branch, and a bouquet from my design stock that I'm going to be using for this particular item. I'm definitely going to get rid of this hideous blue background. Nothing against blue, but this is kind of hideous. And this information's important, so I'm just going to drag it over here because we do need it. But it's Minion, nothing against Minion Pro, but it doesn't have any remembering qualities to it right now. So we're going to get rid of this background. Before I even add any of the things that I found in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a margin. Because we want everything to look clean and professional, we don't want things going all the way to the edge. We want to contain and organize our information. So what we're going to have to do is go to Layout and Margins and Columns and change our margin. For this case, I'm going to use 1/2 inch margin. Normally I use a 1/4 inch margin, but for this I'm going to use the 1/2 inch margin. Now this purple pink line is where you want all your text to stay inside of. Your graphics can drift outside of this past the trim line into the bleed line, but you don't want your text to, unless it's purposefully meant to do so. But if it's important information, you want it to stay inside this margin. So that's our first change compared to the previous piece. Now we know the stuff needs to stay inside here. It cannot go past this line. And we're going to Control D or Command D if you're on a PC, and we're going to go to Resources. We're going to pick up our digital paper. Now, when you don't have an item selected, your resource will come up like this. It'll be a little tiny thumbnail almost. And you'll want to place it away from boxes and other items and just push it in. Now, this graphic goes all the way to the edge, excuse me. And we want it to go to our bleed line because we don't want any white edge when it comes to the printer. So we're going to move this using Control. We're going to hold down Control and Shift, and we're just going to move this so it fits inside the bleed line. We have a little bit of an overhang down here. There we go. And now if we send it to the printer with our bleed settings, this printer could print this and there would be no issue when they try to print it. But we don't want it 100%. That's a bit much. We don't want our background to be the most pushing thing. We want a nice texture, something to show that it's not just a white background. You can have a white background, there's nothing against that, but you want just a little texture. So we're going to make this up here, we're going to change it to, let's say, 20? Seems reasonable. That way it's just enough for the background, it's just enough to be there, and it's not anything that's going to be too much. Now, in our resources from earlier, we have this little wreath here, and I really like the idea of using this wreath, and I think I'm going to, but we have to take in consideration, oh no, where are our layers? This item needs to go up here. We need to take into consideration when we're moving stuff into our document like we are here, we don't want to mistakenly grab something we've already placed and we've already decided that's what we're going to do, like our background. So in your layers panel you have the ability to lock a layer, toggle page item lock. So if we click, say if we select and drag a bunch of things that are on here, we can just select what's unchecked or what's unlocked. So we're not moving our background by mistake. So here we have our information, and while Minion Pro is really nice for some things, we want this to be visually appealing. We want this to catch someone's attention. And so I've decided that the font I'm going to use for this is called The Hand. It was part of a bundle a little while ago for design cuts, and it is right here. And it's a sans serif. It's a really nice handwritten font. And still our stuff's grouped together a little haphazardly. We want this part by itself though. So we're going to make a new text box, staying within our margins here, and we're going to add this to it. Now, with anything, we don't necessarily want to stay with the center alignment. Center alignments are nice, don't get me wrong, and you can use them. You can break the rules, don't get me wrong. But you want to have a strong connection to all your elements. You want all your elements to have an alignment where they connect. You could draw lines on this piece of paper and it will intersect on the edges with another graphic or another piece of text. So in this case, I think I'm going to make this all left aligned. And I think this font's a little too thin for this, so I'm going to make it bold so it sits out. So we have that part of our information taken care of. Now, that little wreath we had earlier, or we talked about earlier, I'm going to use inside this graphic, but I'm going to use it a little odd. I'm going to ignore that down there. I'm going to use it just off the page. I'm trying to decide. I think I'm going to flip it because I really like the little birdie. Let's see, arrange, transform, flip horizontally. I really like this little birdie, so I'm going to use him to have my information. Try and decide where he looks best. And he's going to get off the edge of the page. I think I want to do him like this. No, I think he's too big because we still have this information for the date and for Sunday Best. We still have that, so we want some space here, so we're going to make him a little smaller. We're still going to pull him in a little bit, but we're going to have some space to work with. So I think that's what we're going to do here. We're going to pull him in just like that. And he's gonna encompass our page, but he's gonna help us left align our stuff. Now, I think I'm gonna make him a little bit smaller just to be on the safe side. I can always replace him and enlarge him later if I decide that I'm gonna keep something a certain way. But we're gonna move him in so he's a little offset. Now, you're probably noticing that none of my boxes have their edges viewable unless they're clicked. I found that that makes it a lot easier to design and to work with, because then you can see your items all together and you don't have all the bounding boxes interacting with each other and laying over top of each other, and it's not more confusing to you. So I personally take those away when I design with InDesign because it makes it so much less stressful. So I've placed my wreath here, and I'm gonna, inside of it, I think I'm gonna put the Faith Garden Party. Go back to the edge here, thank you. I think this is the part I'm gonna keep into that section there. So I'm gonna make a little square inside here, and I'm gonna place this in here. But what I want to do with it, the garden party part is the most important for me. Not so much who's hosting. That's still important, but not as important as it's a garden party, or it's a wedding, or it's a graduation. You want the event to be important because it is important. So here, I think I'm going to make these guys pretty big. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase their line spacing some more. And we're going to stretch out the face because we want that, want to have this nice block alignment here. And we can probably make this a little bit bigger. Oops. Make it a little bit bigger, please. And we're gonna put this over here. But we see we have a little bit of a problem. We have some wreath here that's kind of distorting our text. So if we move that wreath a little bit and we pull it in, we're no longer distorting our information, and we're able to effectively, oopsie, make it a little bit bigger, effectively put across our image, our text here, so it's not getting lost in the wreath. And I'm going to make this just a smidge bigger with the horizontal scale, so it spreads out its nice little garden party information. Now we want to take that out of there, so that's what that is. But now we need all the rest of this information, which is really important, but we want to all group it together. We're going to take, the last thing we want is having orphans like this. This is part of this line up here. We want it read all together. So just dress in your Sunday best. And RSVP at no later than, oopsie, August 10th. This box is actually not big enough to hold all that. We want all that together because that's really important. You don't want people showing up last second being like, oh, we RSVP'd on the 11th of August and we expect there to be a thing here for us. That's gonna happen, trust me. Ignore the text below. So, my box is a little crazy here. Oopsie. And I have a line up here I shouldn't have, so let's get this the best we can here. Oops. Need to make my box smaller. Okay. But still, if we set this down here, we're still getting lost. Our information is still getting lost. So what we can do is we can decrease the font size for this. So let's go from 60 to 48. What do you think? Nah. Let's go to 45. And let's pull this in here. We're really close, but our line spacing's really off. I always try to have my line spacing just a few points bigger than, oh no, than whatever item, whatever my point size is, because then it gives us the right amount of space between each line with just a little bit of cushion. If you want them like back to back to back, that's perfectly acceptable. But with some fonts you can't really get away with it because they have low-hanging G's or they have Y's that dip too far in. But be creative by all means. So, like we have our garden party section here, I want to make this equally as effective in the fact that it blocks out like that. So what we're going to do here is, I think we're going to increase, no, we're not going to increase that. That's not going to work. What we are going to do though is we're going to left align all this, so we get the right look like what we have up top. So we know our RSVP section, that's pretty good, but we're missing some things here. I'm gonna put in some little extras that will give it some cute flair, and you can do this with many things if I can find what I'm looking for. Instead of dashes, you can put bullets. You could put a dash here to be more effective. In this case, I'm going to put one of these little guys in here. But now that makes it harder for my text. So if I select all my text with Control A, then I bring it down to 40, that's still a little too small, so we'll do 42. No, 43 works out pretty nicely. It pulls that straight across. Now, we want that because you want August 17th at 5 p.m. That's really important. but dressing your Sunday best isn't part of that information. You want to group the right information together. So this part doesn't need that same kind of heart, because it's important. You RSVP at this number no later than this date. These two are important to each other. They're grouped together for a reason. We don't want to break that up by using the little heart or any other design that you so choose to break up that information. So we're just going to like change our scale here a little bit. So our importance here. Now we're going to move this down some so we are resting on our line down here. Staying within our margins but off of our graphic. Now we have a pretty decent thing here. It's better than it definitely was. We want to, oopsie, not move that. We might want to bold a few things that are really important, like our date. We're going to bold that. Can we black it? Let's black it. This is bolded at the moment, but it's not quite as important, so we're going to regular it. It's still important, but not as important as the August 17th at 5 p.m. Also, what's really important is this RSVP and no later than. We want to black that too, because we want to make that information really noticeable. We want that information to be recognizable. Like if you're looking at all the elements together, you want to be able to notice the RSVP number and when to RSVP by. And another way we can do that is adding different colors. Now earlier I sampled a color from this wreath to use, and I think I'm going to use it here. This nice dark purple. I'm a purple fiend, so I will use it whenever I can. So we want the cordially invited part to be forefront because we want you to know you're invited. It's not just advertising it, but we want you to know you're invited. We also want to emphasize that it's a garden party. And then we're going to use our items here for importance. Now, you can do this a couple different ways. You can make this whole line that purple color, or you can make everything but that singular item that particular color. It's entirely up to you. Oh no, no yellow. Pink's a little bit better. We don't want people mistaking that this isn't important, because it is. Oh no. But we don't want there to be something where you look at it and you're like, well, how is no later than August 10th more important than the RSVP number? A lot of people don't take into consideration when they're RSVPing, they think they can do it last minute, and that's fine. We want emphasis on no later than August 10th, because then it gives us 7 days to figure it out. So we're going to make this a little bit bolder. And we're going to change this back to black, I think. Let's see how that looks. And we're going to take the RSVP number, and we're going to make that colored. I think we're going to bold this. So that way everything's even down here. And we're going to change the heart color back to black. Now, our important information is emphasized. The garden party. August 17th at 5 p.m. The telephone number. And no later than August 10th. These are really important items, and we want people to make sure they pay attention to them. So differentiating their color, I think I'm going to change that back to black now that I'm looking at it. Changing the color and changing their font style, or their typeface style, we're putting emphasis to them. Before, everything was grouped together, we weren't quite sure about what was what, and we were having a lot of trouble with the general information. It wasn't cordoned off like it should be. It was very, I wouldn't say difficult to read, but it was everything jumbled together. It's kind of like you just threw it haphazardly on there last second, and you're not putting thought into it. You want people to believe you put thought into what you're designing. Now I think I'm also going to left justify this instead of centering it. Even though it's blocked, it will be just the same, just so my box can be... my box can be the right size. And then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, I think. Just, uh-oh, not that big. Just a smidgen. So, it's there and it's important, and you're conveying the thought without it being boring. And it's very memorable. You could definitely get this and want to keep it. I personally know I would, not just because I designed it, but because it's actually very nice. And to kind of keep this bullet theme going, you can copy and paste the bullet up here. And make it the same size. Oh no! My glyph is gone! Now to find it again. I lose it every time. There we go. And it'll just keep a kind of theme where we want to use the bullet again so it has consistency. And so it is... You don't have to use the same one either. You can use a different one. Let's use this little one. But they're hearts of a similar design, so they're cohesive in that manner. But whenever you design something, whenever you design something, you want to make sure you have a strong alignment. Center alignment, it's not as strong as it could be. And sometimes you can use the center alignment effectively and it look really nice. But you want to have a certain alignment and you want to stick with it. You don't want to decide, okay, these items will be left justified and another group of items will be right justified. There has to be a reason why it is like that. Otherwise, stick with one alignment and it'll provide a stronger feeling, a stronger consistency to your design. Another thing you want to watch out for is using too many fonts. If we designed this and we used 10 different fonts, it would have been really tacky and unprofessional looking. And our purpose is to be professional looking as well as being creative and fun, while making people want to keep things. People by nature will want to look at something visually appealing. So you want your flyer to be visually appealing. And the best way to go about that is to make it visually appealing, not just slap stuff on a piece of paper and expect people to want to keep it just because you made it. That's not necessarily the case. Just because you touch something, you design something, doesn't mean that people will automatically want to look at it. Now, let's see here. Let's just presentation this. And here's pretty much the finished product. You, of course, will make more tweaks, I'm sure, and change some colors, but this is much better of a design point than where you started. You really want to make someone want to look at it. You want to design it in a way that is appealing for both the eyes and the soul. And that sounds really strange. But when people look at something and it makes them feel good or it makes them happy or smile, they'll want to look at it more. So it's good for them and good for you. So you want to make sure you consider that in the things you design. Now, it didn't take us very long to fix what originally we had to work with. Probably the most time that you spend designing something will be collecting resources and figuring out what you want to design and how you want a thought to convey. Whether you want to use really classic feeling sans serifs, a very strong formal look, which is most often what you find when you have a center justified alignment or center alignment. It's very formal, very unyielding. But you want something memorable. So this is much more memorable than, say, creating something similar but using sans serifs with all center alignments. You need to experiment and find what works for you. Now this may not work for you. You may absolutely detest this. You want to do something completely different. Then by all means do something completely different. Find what works for you, because that's essentially what your job as a designer is. Find out what works for you, what you prefer, and figure out in your designs how you can convey that, where you're not only using the same typeface and the same type style, where you're using different colors, you're using different backgrounds and different texture elements and graphical elements. Just break away from center alignment and do something with a strong alignment left or right, and don't mix your alignments. Don't use a lot of different fonts unless you're purposely making a thing that's not what to do, which I've seen people do, and it's just absolutely lovely in that sense. But find what works and what doesn't, and be mindful of things that people don't always consider, like left justification. Be mindful of the elements. If I were to draw a line on this page, these elements would connect on this end. You want that to happen. You want these elements to connect. You want important ones to be grouped together, like the time, the day, the instructions. You want these things together. You want the face garden party together, because you want to know who's hosting and what it is. And you want to know that someone's invited too. You can't just have invited and two over here. That's not going to work. You want everything, whether it be we welcome you to, or please take part in our wedding with us, or come celebrate our union. You want all these things, important things, grouped together. You don't want them separate. If I were to put garden party here and the face up here, that wouldn't effectively convey what I'm trying to convey. So be mindful of what you're putting down, and take the time to break away from what you would consider strong, like a center alignment, because it isn't always. It definitely hurts your design sometimes as opposed to improves it. But try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, don't be heartbroken that it's not working. Stick with the single alignment, whether it's left or right or complete straight across. And mess with things, whether it be color or font, boldness or thinness or underlining stuff even. Experiment. Don't make everything one single shade or one single something. You can't be afraid to do these things. You have to want to improve. And by doing so, it means stepping out of the box every once in a while, designing something that maybe you wouldn't normally design, or designing in a way you wouldn't normally do it. You have to constantly push yourself as a designer, and you can't just always be doing center justified alignments with the same font all the way through, or the same, well, in this case I did use the same font, but I used different styles of the font. You want to have some kind of diversity. And if you use the same typeface and the same style, differentiate by color, because that's another way to change it, like I did here. You want to find out what works and what doesn't, and the best way to do that is to experiment. So I welcome you to experiment as much as you can, and always be trying to improve yourself as a designer, and try to improve yourself as a whole, because you don't want to be stuck at a plateau where you're constantly the same thing all the way through, and you're wondering why you're not feeling as good when you complete a design. So hopefully this was helpful to you. It gave you maybe some ideas about what to change for other things, maybe how to improve, or just in general some key tips to remind yourself of later. But we went from the really awful single color background, black text, to this really nice, ready for print actually, design that you literally could take and print right now and it would print fine. It'd be beautiful. Well, I'd tweak it a little bit, but you want your design to be memorable, and we've done that here. We've made it something someone will be like, oh, this is so cool. You want that feeling. So hopefully your designs will have that memorable element to them and correctly give the information and information not get lost. So I just want to say happy designing and have fun, because you always want to improve and experiment. See you in the next video.